If I can ask a question, we left off with diversity of media ownership. Where do you think conservatives and liberals' views, where do you think their views intersect?
Well, I think our views intersect in the grounds that we both believe that a freer market in media ownership, a real free market, would be a more beneficial thing and would allow for both a better media and one that has a more diversity of views. I mean, the irony of it, of course, is that in order to have a free market, you really have to enforce the regulations, you know? But I'll let Lynn pick it up from here. But basically, I think we agree that a freer market that had more diversity in ownership would be a better media.
You take a city like Houston, KTRH is the big radio station there for news. It has a news department. KPRC also has a news department. The problem is they're the same news department. So you don't get two viewpoints there, or two slants, or two versions of the news. You get one instead of two. So I believe that I come from a day when I worked news in Dallas where there were 9 or 10 radio stations that had major news departments. Now there's KRLD and WBAP, and that's about it.
I don't think that the lack of diversity. I mean, I think one of the problems with not having a lot of newspapers, for example, so we're talking my language here for a second, if you don't mind, is the competition that lends itself to better reporting in general. I don't think it's, you're going to have 3 different slants. I think what it is you're going to have more people trying to compete for the readership of the marketplace and doing better journalism, period. Because at the end of the day, a slanted Dallas Morning News is not going to sell more papers. In fact, it's going to sell less papers or fewer papers. And, you know, you can argue all day whether the slants of one newspaper is or the other. You know, certainly people have their opinions on that. But I think that the biggest danger when there's shrinking news outlets is the shrinking number of voices and the competition that naturally breeds better reporting.
Sure. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, since we're talking newspapers, the Chronicle, the Houston Chronicle, and the San Antonio Express News share an Austin bureau. I mean, people have noted that over the years, I think Paul Burker wrote about this on Texas Monthly, that over the years the number of people in Austin covering the legislature has shrunk and is continuing to shrink. And what you get is less coverage, which serves nobody's purpose.
When you hear a newscast on WOAI on the weekends, it most likely was recorded at KTRH in Houston and emailed to San Antonio.
Or you'll see a New York Times story that's been published in the Dallas Morning News Inside, or LA Times published in the Inside, the San Antonio Express, and that's a function of just fewer and fewer reporters' resources.
Okay. Well, I have one more question for y'all. What do you think about Ron Paul being blacked out from the media?
Blacked out?
Yeah.
Can you define that question?
Basically not being,
Well, Fox News, kick him off the debate.
Well, there's two things. Okay, there's two things. I mean, it has been a long-standing rule, I don't know if it's a rule or a tradition, that, in presidential debates, people can be excluded based on their level of support. It happened to Ralph Nader in 2004, which, given that he got, 0.38% of the vote, seems like a pretty reasonable thing. In Ron Paul's case, it was a little bit different in that, Fox News clearly had a vested interest in one candidate in particular, Mitt Romney. And, I mean, it got to the point where even, the chair of the New Hampshire GOP was saying, this is ridiculous, let him in. So, I mean, I think they just I think it's okay for an organization to exclude a candidate if they believe that candidate doesn't meet a certain threshold of support or doesn't meet, some other well-defined criterion. But those rules have to be enforced consistently, and by any measure that's usually used, Ron Paul had more support than, for example, Fred Thompson at the time. And it was ridiculous to exclude him and not exclude someone who had less support than he did.
Well, I look at the Democrats. Mike Gravel was on so many of those debates. Dennis Kucinich was on so many of those debates, and you wonder why. They had virtually zero level of support among the people. So there comes a point where you have to sort of weed it out and get down to the real candidates. Just the way it works.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take up much more of y'all's time. I do have
Karen
one more
have an
question.
No.
Okay.
I just have one more question. Do you think the internet is our last hope for free speech and free press?
It's an interesting question. I don't think it's our last hope. I think it's a growing backstop to any any shrinking opportunities for free speech and free free press in the general marketplace. I think the internet is a great outlet for voices and for that, what they like to call citizen journalism. And you'll have some good things to say about this, I know, being a blogger, but I think that at some point, there's going to be a time on the internet when those voices start to separate again. When the voices of opinion versus the voices of news or journalism or press are going to start separating again. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's fine. I don't know that it's automatic, but certainly I think that it's not going anywhere.
Could I change the subject?
Well, let me answer the question before you do that. I don't think I agree with the formulation that I don't think it's the last hope. I mean, I think the last hope for free press or free speech is, respecting the First Amendment and enforcing the laws.
Constitution of the United States.
I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, the internet, in the form of, blogs, comment forums, you name it, certainly adds to that in that it does bring a greater diversity of viewpoint out there, and in particular, there's no barrier to entry. I mean, you don't have to spend $1 billion to buy a TV station. You can pay $100 a year for web hosting, and have an audience. But I mean, our last best hope is respecting the Constitution.
If I can invent a new adjective for you, it would be Mary Beth Harrell-esque. And the Mary Beth Harrell-esque comment that conservative radio is angry is the biggest piece of baloney I believe I've ever seen in my life. It's like the lady on the videotape who won't listen to Rush Limbaugh ever because he's too negative. How does she know? She never listens to him. Rush Limbaugh has the most positive, upbeat, optimistic, and fun show of any show out there. It's why it's so successful. And I try to be optimistic too. I think America is a great country. I think we have a great future. I think democracy is the greatest experiment ever. I think we have the best health care system in the entire world. We don't pull our own teeth with pliers like they do in Britain. We don't have to go to Cleveland like they do in Canada. But the point is, Rush runs parodies. He does comedy routines. He mixes the fun with the real information, and it is a hilarious show to listen to. It's fun, it's upbeat, but if you had to pick one go away. If you had to pick one adjective to describe the Limbaugh show other than conservative, it would be optimistic. He's bullish on America.
I don't think it was, but hold on. It was in your own book where you pointed out that Limbaugh, after the Bushes were elected, after the Clintons were elected or reelected, that he did a joke about the new dog in the White House, and he was talking about 13-year-old Chelsea Clinton. That's not funny. That's not optimistic. That's just mean. And it's at a 13-year-old girl's expense.
That is still true. True. I talked about that on my show today because Chelsea Clinton has come out of the closet and she's now political, and I invited her to become a conservative. And I say, you may have Clinton in your blood, but it doesn't need to be in your politics. Now, on the other hand, I don't know. Rush disputes that story, if you read my book, and I don't know the facts about that.
Well,
but
it's either on tape or it isn't. I mean, there is no dispute. I mean, either she was in Bosnia getting rained bullets on, or she wasn't. I mean,
yeah, I think she wasn't.
Yeah, I don't think she was either. But the point is, Rush said that and did that, or he didn't. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think the bottom line is everybody has to be held accountable, and I think there has to be a level of accountability for the rhetoric and the kind of ugly, nasty things that get said on certainly not your show, but ultra-conservative talk shows, whether it's Rush or Nancy or Glenn or Lou. I think what we're talking about ultimately is accountability, and I think ultimately that's what the Fairness Doctrine would have been trying to do. Don't think it would work, but I think that's what everybody's looking for. They're looking for accountability.
You guys want to know what talk radio was about in the throes of the Fairness Doctrine? Because I was a newscaster for the Ed Bush show in Dallas.
They should read your book.
Years and years ago, in the late 70s and early 80s, when we were under the Fairness Doctrine, we talked about the power of the pyramids, the John Kennedy assassination. We talked about if Rockefeller were to become vice president, would he kill the president and take over? It was all space aliens. It was all conspiracies and stuff like that.
They're still having that
you ever listen to Art Bell?
They're still having that conversation, but now the blogs
they're having that conversation at the Trinity United Church of Christ every Sunday morning, too. But you couldn't do politics. You simply couldn't do politics.